Hey folks, I'm Jared Houghton, one of the founders here at ambition.com. I'm excited to be talking with Doug Gibbs today. Doug, you want to do a quick intro of yourself?
Sure, happy to. So I'm a senior manager for inside sales for waste management out of our Phoenix Center. I've been with the company about 10 years, in sales for the last 6 years, and I support our team through sales operations and process improvement, et cetera. So supporting systems and our recent remote deployment is one of the primary responsibilities I carry out for our group.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard some pretty good things from our CS team. Excited to have you on this mini series today. Looks like you're remote on your back porch. Not too hot on the in the Phoenix weather yet.
Still enjoying it in the morning.
Good. Well, I guess the purpose of today is, we are doing this mini series on, going remote. This is basically unprecedented times for all of us. We're figuring it out. And I guess let's kick it off with, give us an idea of the team today. What were they doing before? What are you guys doing today? Give us an overview of kind of what it looked like, kind of pre-remote life.
Well, I'd say from a team standpoint, we are polar opposites from where we started 6 or 7 weeks ago. We had explored the thought of remote workforce, and we were just naturally convinced that with an inside sales team, you want hands-on and in the office, and that we had a distinct advantage of being with our people every day versus our outside sales partners, as an example. And we've been pleasantly surprised. One, the deployment outside went very smoothly. We were up and running the same day we started sending people home based on the technologies that we deploy through DialSource and Ambition, and have been so pleased with how the teams have progressed that we've made a decision to roll out our current platform to the rest of our inside sales teams located outside of our Phoenix Center. So really seeing this as being a very positive solution for us and really engaging with our people. We've seen it in their productivity stats and in the engagement we've had that it really is has proved to be a very positive environment for us.
I think that's awesome. Roughly how many people are we talking about today? How many did you guys move remote? And that's great that you're able to do it in just one day.
Sure. So we have 275 employees at the center. Of those, about almost most of them, 250, are on the technology platforms that I mentioned. The rest are support folks like sales coordinators, as an example, but the vast majority are dependent on inbound or outbound calls or the management team that support those groups.
That's awesome. And I was just going to jump back one bit there. You said you talked about remote before. So you guys had discussed that, but being an inside center, obviously that was something that you didn't really think possible, but it sounds like you're able to do it in a day. And what I think is, maintain pretty great numbers. Tell us more about, how are you keeping them engaged, and how are you, keeping them motivated, given that we're not in the office where we're all used to managing our teams and seeing everybody?
Sure. Well, from a person-to-person basis, our teams, and you can imagine they're broken up to channels or market areas or particular functions that they support. So we generally have a manager and supervisor to about 1 to 10 to 12 employees. So those smaller groups are meeting on a daily basis. They're having huddles in the mornings via chat and or video to the extent possible, to remain in contact and basically set the tone every day. Really our key to the engagement part of it is the technology that we deploy. So Ambition, as an example, still gives us TVs that we can share on their screens. It gives us full visibility to their statistics, their metrics, the information that we're discussing. They can see what they've produced every single day based on their outcomes. And everything is transparent because the managers look at the same thing as the employees do. So it really makes things throughout the day self-paced and self-managed to a great extent, so that when we do touch base and we have conversations, everybody's on the same page.
That's awesome. And when you say, self-managed, I guess like through Ambition scorecards, is that something that the reps, I guess took home well. I know within the office, you've got, the TVs that you guys are used to celebrating. But, when you're not, in the office getting that public recognition, are they still, self-managing just as they were before through that, recognition? It's probably coming in a different way. I guess maybe you could tell us a little bit more about remote recognition.
Yeah, Jared, it definitely has changed. So in the office, you can pace the floor. Frequently, managers and supervisors shouldn't be at their desks. They should either be side by side or out on the floor, listening to, working with their folks, giving them those daily accolades, recognizing what they're doing. And now we're remote. So we're even more dependent upon the technology and sharing that information than we were before. So whether it is actually using the accolades feature itself to set triggers so that we can give recognition throughout the day. We use them more as positive triggers than negatives. You could certainly look to see who didn't make a particular result, but it's much more rewarding and engaging when people exceed the expectations and they get that recognition. So that type of day-to-day interaction, I'd say, has actually increased. And so much so that on a daily basis, every afternoon, our entire management team is meeting for half an hour. We are practicing using the new coaching tools that we have grasped in Ambition as an example, and looked at the ongoing contests that are occurring and actually having readouts on a rotational basis for the managers about how we're using the tool. We thought we were using it before, but when we step away and take a look at what we're doing from a remote basis, and you look at the trend lines and the curve lines as to where we started and thought we were doing a good job when I mentioned that we deployed so quickly and we were on the phones and we were engaging with customers, to see the activity level over the last 3 weeks specifically, while we've been focusing on that communication and allowing our employees to have a better understanding of the scorecards and knowing what the inputs and the outcomes are, that those scores have improved dramatically across the board. Our managers proudly tell the story when it has their opportunity to do the presentation in the afternoon, to blow their own horn, so to speak, and show what that trend line is doing and how those improvements are being driven through those conversations.
That's awesome. Actually, I'm gonna revisit two things you said there. One was positive, recognition triggers. It's obviously, every manager out there wants to understand, who is not, being productive, who is not making a lot of phone calls. But I think right now, especially, it's important to have those positive, notifications going out. Can you give us some examples? You mentioned that you're focused on the positive. What do you guys recognize in the team for in those triggers?
Sure. So one example, easy one for any of us in sales to understand, is contacts. So we're looking at inbound and outbound calls as an example, and depending on the team, they may have a target of 25, 50, 100, depending on their team. So many of them are sending those positive triggers out for anyone exceeding that particular parameter as an example. The other thing, we want to engage with customers. So we look at talk time very closely. We're not so concerned necessarily about, maybe I just got to my 50 target or my 25 target and didn't exceed it, but how much time did I actually spend engaging with a customer? We have changed their jobs, our representatives' jobs, so much over the last 2 months while we've been going through this transition. Their targets have changed completely. We have backed off in several of our areas where we would be engaging and looking at revenue, and instead we're trying to save customers. So as one could imagine, as a waste services, environmental services provider, we have a lot of businesses out there who are struggling, or they're no longer in business, or they're temporarily out of business. So we've shifted from we're out for sales and revenue, into how can we save our customers? How can we reduce their revenue at service levels timely, so that they can afford to continue business with us when things ramp back up again, and so that we can make those adjustments and make things much more efficient for them. So the focus is less on, let's recognize someone for being 150% of their goal. That would be great. However, right now it's on those customer contacts and those special outreach programs that we are doing and changing their roles.
That's, I talk to a lot of customers, and, we're not dissimilar ourselves. We're focusing on the base. Right now is an uncertain time for everybody. So obviously, customers like you, customers and other interviews we're doing, we're trying to focus in on helping you make this transition. So it's super smart that you guys are doing that. I think many of our customers are doing similar things. And what that means, I think, is kind of identifying that new normal for the role. It's not make a ton of outbound calls to new business. It's different metrics. It's defining what the new successful day is, focused in on the customer base and maintaining that value. So love to hear that. Another thing you mentioned was end of day kind of coaching recaps with managers. I'm curious just to get a quick overview of what coaching was like, you're on this, you see everybody, you hear the conversations, and what it's like now. You talked a little bit about that, but tell us more about like this one-on-ones with individual contributors.
Sure. Well, I would say that we would have boasted before we entered into this recent period that we had a strong coaching program. We had a regimen in place. We had standardized forms. They were fairly simple. A very easy rating structure because we don't want complexity in the outcome. We just want to know that we had a positive experience with the customer and we generated a quality conversation, as an example, with an expectation of twice a month formal sit downs with an employee for a coaching session and at least one review of pipeline, as an example. Obviously, there were still day-to-day conversations, but that was the documentation we were looking for. Making the shift to remote and leveraging the coaching tools available in Ambition, we found that we had a long ways to go. And that's what I was speaking about recently with the changing specifically over the last 3 weeks and seeing the level of engagement on specific metrics that we could look at in the activity scorecards or in the outcomes, that our coaching became much more. I think a recent example of that is you introduced a brand new feature called Ask within the last week. Our group immediately picked that up and we started getting employees asking for goals. I would like to see more information like this in my coaching, et cetera. And although they could have had those conversations with their managers and had those kinds of conversations, now we actually know what the level of interest is, and the managers have an easy opportunity to increase that engagement through that Ask feature back and forth about various components, whether it is on goals or it's on system enhancement features or, gee, I just need help types of categories. I have even had some escalated to me simply because they're looking for more of a system or a how can we accomplish this kind of thing, or give me a better understanding of this particular metric so I know how I can influence it. So really it's more deep diving and having the information available. I was always there, but dealing with it from a remote basis and not having the direct observation about what's somebody doing in their seat, et cetera, you have to rely more on these types of data that are available. And fortunately, given the tools we have, it's immediately there. You just need to use it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear that you guys are using Ask. It's had a really positive feedback from the market or from customers so far. So it's always good to just give people the tools to more quickly deliver from a management side on what they want. And I'm glad to hear they're asking for more goals. Another quick question: what about and we talked a little bit about recognition, but what about specifically gamification? Are you guys trying that right now? Is now the right time? Have you found any successful ways to do more gamification or contests right now?
Well, let's see. We have about 30 management team members, and we have about 30 different flavors of competitions going on.
Yeah.
So they're doing everything from a daily, what do we want to focus on today? How do we get hyped up? How do we want to kick the week off? To several that are doing the series, so that they've got 4 or 5 different weeks that they have competitions that are the one-on-ones that are in place. They're gauging, in some cases, revenue, where we have some revenue starting back up again, but in most part, it's specific items that a team wants to work on, or what is a particular opportunity we have given the special projects that we're working on. So I've seen a lot more engagement, a lot more activity in our competitions today than what we were doing before. If anything, we're trying to pull back just a little bit so that we make sure that they have meaning. So it's not just a case of what do we want to do different today, to make sure that it's something that's actually driving results and keeping the employees engaged.
Let us know. We'd be happy to provide some insights and some best practices on that. Quick question, more of a hot take question. We've all been forced into this. It wasn't something I think anybody was thinking about before, but you guys made the transition in a day, and it sounds like you're having pretty good success. As things open back up, as we hopefully can get back in the office, do you see this being a part of the future at all at Waste Management, or do you imagine will be maybe a flex schedule where people can work from home? What would be your kind of take on how you move forward as things go back to normal?
Sure. So obviously we're working on that today because restrictions might be released in the near future, or will be released in the near future to some extent, and it's going to vary by area. We foresee work from home being a very strong part of our model going forward. We want to make and are making more of an investment in our inside sales teams and growing that opportunity across our enterprise. So where we were recently examining, do we want to, start a new center? We see this as a way to be able to leverage our current resources, keep them remote with people that know the market areas, but still develop best practices and a more consistent approach across the enterprise. So we're extending these platforms we've been discussing outside of the Phoenix Sales Center and on across the rest of our enterprise to the inside sales teams that are remotely located from us. One, so they have a more consistent platform, and two, so that we can leverage this in-home workforce and still keep the local area knowledge available. We may have retention teams, as an example, that work closely together on strategies for customers and may typically hand off one customer from one rep to another through the course of a day. That's easier done face-to-face, so those teams may spend a couple days a week in the office for that experience. But I would be highly doubtful that we will have much of our sales team full-time inside going forward.
Got it. Well, Doug, this has been great. I'm obviously super excited to have you on this series. Any parting words of recommendation? This has been solid so far, but anything else for other peers managing their teams remote? Any parting words for them?
Be open to change. Everything that we've discussed today may change tomorrow. Right. Because of the opportunities we have available to us and not knowing what's going to happen with this pandemic and other things. So we're going to continue to leverage tools and technology to make sure that we're prepared to be able to do that. We appreciate the partnership that we have with Ambition and others who are supporting us. You mentioned the shift that you have made to assist customers, and we've really felt that. Reaching out to your team as an example and exploring what can we do, how can we go about it, how can we better understand this coaching module that we've been speaking about as an example. Use those resources because they're readily available, and we've really found that they have enabled us to make the changes that we need to make to move forward.
That's great. Well, thanks, Doug. Really appreciate you being on here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you very much.